My name is Jessica. I'm a 35-year-old office worker. Since my husband Bob, who is 2 years younger than me, was transferred, we've been temporarily living with his parents. I stress, it's only temporary. Bob seems to enjoy living in his childhood home, but I am eager to find our own place and move out as quickly as possible. This is because I simply can't get along with my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law. She was always a nasty person, even before our marriage, but after living together, her attitude is more harsh than before.
Jessica, haven't you gone shopping yet? You missed the supermarket's early bird sale. You can't even shop efficiently. Tisk, tisk.
I work from home with my company's permission, but I'm still working during weekdays. There's no way I could make time for my shopping at the supermarket's early bird sale time. Mother-in-law, as I've said many times, I work during the day, so I can't go shopping until after 5 p.m. Every time I say this, my mother-in-law criticizes me.
Here she goes, so arrogant. Can't even have a child.
Bob and I don't have children. We haven't specifically checked at the hospital, so we don't know who is to blame. I wanted a child, but considering Bob's income, we couldn't afford the expensive fertility treatments. Even before moving in together, I was distressed by my mother-in-law's nasty remarks, but it was better when we were living separately. Living under the same roof day and night, I am exposed to her nasty remarks 24/7. My father-in-law doesn't directly make snide remarks, but he irritates me in a different way. He seems to believe that women over 30 years old are old lady, and treats me, a 35-year-old woman, as such.
Hey, old lady, get me the ashtray. Why are you wearing a skirt? No one wants to see your legs.
I want to tell him, if I'm an old lady, what does that make you, who's turning 60? I'm not a pushover either, so I retort each time they make rude remarks about me. But that only leads to further deterioration of our relationship as they consider it bossy. There is always a tense atmosphere in the house, and I was already feeling the limit of living together. However, after the transfer, Bob started working more on weekends and going on more business trips, so we couldn't discuss moving out. Jessica, I have another business trip this weekend. Again? You just went on a business trip. This new branch seems to have a lot of business trips. Before his transfer, although he had to work overtime, there were hardly any weekend work or business trips. Can't be helped, right? The work changes with the workplace. Sure, things change when jobs change, but isn't this a bit much? Thanks to this, we are not even able to find a place to move, even though we were supposed to live with my in-laws temporarily. What if we had to live with my in-laws for a long time? I was afraid of that. But then, one day, something happened. As I was removing laundry from Bob's bag after his business trip, I found a piece of paper in his bag's pocket. It turned out to be a printout of an online booking from a travel website. I figured it was just the flight and hotel booking for his business trip, but when I read it more closely, I couldn't believe my eyes. There was a hotel reservation that included tickets to Disneyland for 2 people, and the date was yesterday. That is, the day Bob was on a business trip. Of course, Bob's company has nothing to do with Disneyland. Sure, they deal in seafood, but that's as close as they get to Disneyland. It doesn't matter. This means that Bob was pretending to go on a business trip, when in fact, he was visiting Disneyland for 2 days. And the fact that the hotel reservation was for 2 people? There's no doubt he was with a woman. As I was reeling from the shock, I heard Bob humming in the shower. It's a small world after all. The well-known theme song of a famous ride. He must have been reminiscing about Disneyland and humming unconsciously. But it seems that attractions are not important in a fun and enjoyable affair trip. I was so angry that I was ready to charge into the bathroom and confront Bob. But just then, Bob's phone rang. I was too enraged to think clearly, so I answered the call without thinking. Hello? Hello? For a moment, I heard a young woman's voice, and then the call was abruptly cut off. Could it be? I was convinced. The call just now was no doubt from the woman Bob went to Disneyland with. In other words, Bob's mistress. When she heard my voice answering Bob's phone, she must have panicked and hung up. I checked the call history on his smartphone. Bob isn't really security conscious, so he doesn't bother to set a decent password. I figured his passcode would probably be his 4-digit birth date. And bingo! The phone was unlocked in no time. But looking through his smartphone made my head spin. Evidence of his infidelity was pouring out of it, unmistakable and overwhelming. The image files were full of selfies of him and a young woman. The dates the photos were taken were all days when Bob had been on business trips or working on his days off. I was amazed at his recklessness, even leaving pictures of their intimate moments. Looking at the call history again, I saw the name Melissa Smith, so I searched for the same name in his WhatsApp friends list and opened the chat screen. "Bob, I love you. I want to be your wife soon." This woman, Melissa, seems to be hoping to marry Bob. A homewrecker, perhaps? As I was mulling this over, Bob came out of the bathroom. Ah, that's refreshing. Facing Bob, who came out nonchalantly, drying his hair with a towel, I confronted him right away. "Refreshed, huh? Seems like you're feeling pretty refreshed in a lot of ways." "Huh? Who is Melissa Smith?" At the mention of his mistress's name, Bob flinched. "So it's true. You've been lying about going on business trips, and instead, you've been going on trips alone with this woman, Melissa Smith? Were all your business trips and working days off just lies? Unforgivable. Why do you... How on earth?" I pointed my smartphone at the upset Bob. "All the evidence is right here in this smartphone. Hey, did you go snooping through my phone? That's a violation of my privacy." It's laughable that a man who's morally bankrupt enough to cheat can complain about privacy invasion. If you don't want it looked at, set a better password. Before we got married, I made a promise with Bob that he'd absolutely not cheat. I had declared to Bob that if he cheated, I'd leave him right away. Of course, my feelings haven't changed. I can't continue a marital life with a man who's playing around with another woman. Let's get a divorce. When I simply said that, Bob surprisingly agreed without objection. Yeah, I guess so. It was unexpected. I thought he would resist more. Was he ready for divorce once he was caught cheating? "I'll get the divorce papers tomorrow. You tell your mom and dad." Got it. Bob's agreement was astonishingly nonchalant. However, once a declaration has been issued, it cannot be withdrawn, and it has no intention of doing so. Is this goodbye to married life? I felt a tinge of loneliness. The next day, I left the house early in the morning to get the divorce papers from the city office and to take care of some other errands. By the time I got home, it was already late at night. There in the house, my husband and his parents were waiting for me. "So you finally come back. We were wondering how long you were going to wander around." The moment she saw me, my mother-in-law began to make snide remarks. Bob being present here means she should already know about Bob's cheating and our divorce. Isn't there something she should say, like an apology, before making a snide comment? But instead of an apology, my mother-in-law said something unbelievable. "Well, it doesn't matter. At least you're finally leaving. We don't want to see your face anymore, so it's just as well you've been gone all day." "What do you mean?" With a smug smile, my mother-in-law responded to my question. "Exactly as I said. I'm sick and tired of seeing your face. Finally, Bob has returned home, and you were just in the way. You're always back-talking, without any hint of charm, even when I tried to make you uncomfortable enough to leave. It took so long for you to get the hint. I finally had to resort to my ace in the hole." Ace in the hole? My mother-in-law gave a satisfied smile. "You already know the name of Bob's girlfriend, right?" "Yes, something like Smith." Why was she checking if I knew the name of Bob's mistress? You see, I have a friend from my book club, Mrs. Smith. Her daughter is such a well-mannered, charming young lady. She's 10 years younger than you, only 25. At that age, she can have kids easily." Then my mother-in-law dropped a bomb. "So I introduced Mrs. Smith's daughter to Bob." "Excuse me?" I was shocked. I never expected my mother-in-law to say something like this to me. "Are you saying, mother-in-law, you arranged Bob's affair?" "Oh, arranged sounds so scandalous. I simply introduced them." I was completely taken aback by my mother-in-law, proudly talking about her own wrongdoings. I can't believe that a mother would induce her own son to cheat on her. And she is so proud to tell her son's wife about it. What a horrible mother. Well, I had no other choice. Bob is our only child. We need an heir. I would have even accepted you as my daughter-in-law if you'd had children. But all you did was work, never having any children. Next to my mother-in-law, my father-in-law also nodded in agreement. So he was aware of his wife's actions. "Do you understand? A 35-year-old woman who can't even have kids is no longer needed. If you understand, then hurry up and leave." With a triumphant look, my mother-in-law pointed at me. After a moment of silence, I said, "I see. I understand your views very clearly. I'll leave as you wish. I'll take all my belongings with me." "Oh, please do. I doubt you have much to take with you anyway. Do you need help moving?" My mother-in-law laughed and said, even though she didn't know anything. But I was the one who would have the last laugh. "No, it's fine. Don't worry about me. Everything's already arranged." "Huh?" Since I wasn't crying or freaking out, my mother-in-law looked surprised. "Besides, mother-in-law, I already know that you were helping Bob cheat on me." "What?" I smirked at my mother-in-law. "What do you think I've been doing all day? If I just went to the city hall to get divorce papers, it wouldn't have taken this long. I spent all day arranging for a move and meeting with Melissa Smith." "Oh my God. You met with Melissa?" Bob asked me in a panic. "So what? Did you think I would let you cheat behind my back and not say a word to the other woman? I made sure to note down her phone number when I checked your phone yesterday," I said calmly. Poor Melissa, though, she was really surprised when I called her and said, "I'm Bob's wife. I'd like to meet with you. Apparently, you've been lying to her, saying that you're single." I told her the whole truth. Bob, my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law were all shocked. They never would have thought I'd pull something like this off in just one day. Melissa found out that she was the other woman in your affair, and she was really upset. Of course, Mrs. Smith was furious too, at Bob and at you, mother-in-law. She was talking about suing you both for marriage fraud. I couldn't help but sympathize with her, so I promised I'd help as much as I could. What? Bob was visibly shaken. Of course, my mother-in-law was in the same state. Given the many ways in which Melissa deserves sympathy, I've decided not to claim any compensation from her. Instead, I'll increase the amount I claim from you, Bob, and you, mother-in-law, and father-in-law.
"Compensation? Why the hell do we have to pay damages?"
My father-in-law blurted out in panic.
"It's one thing if it's just Bob, but we have nothing to do with this."
He seemed to have expected his son to pay some compensation for his affair, but they never dreamt that they themselves would pay. "Are you going to take the best part without getting hurt? There's no such thing." "Of course you do. The emotional distress caused by your harassment is more than enough reason, don't you think?" As I said this with a smile, my father-in-law fell silent. "And have you forgotten what I do for a living? I work at a law firm. Why don't I consult with my boss, the attorney, and see just how much we can squeeze out of you in compensation?" I had already informed my attorney at the firm about the situation. What? Then the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway was heard. "Oh, they're here."
"Hey there, this is a moving service."
I headed to the door with a warm smile on my face. "Thanks for having you come at late time. Sorry for the sudden request."
"No problem. We had a spot open for the night shift."
It actually worked out for me as well. I managed to get some other things done, so please get started right away. Oh, and be careful. There are some fragile items. As I invited them in, several movers began to shuffle into the house and start gathering the belongings.
"Wait! Hold on!"
Following my instructions, they began to pack up my things with a swift and efficient rhythm. Not just my clothes, books, and computer, but even the appliances in the living room and kitchen.
Hey, you guys, don't take that. That's ours.
No. I brought everything here when we moved in. They're all mine. When Bob and I first moved here because of his job transfer, all the appliances in the in-laws' house were old ones that they'd been using for ages. I couldn't bear it and had our appliances shipped over from our previous apartment. Now it seemed that my mother-in-law had gotten used to the latest appliances and mistaken them for her own. A robotic vacuum and cordless cleaner. A high-end oven range capable of various cooking methods. An induction cooktop. A negative ion hairdryer, and an espresso machine.
You're taking everything? You greedy woman!
Mother-in-law lunged at me, but Bob stopped her.
Mom, it can't be helped.
But it's all Jessica's. It seemed that Bob had accepted the situation. However, it seemed that my mother-in-law wasn't ready to give up just yet. Once you know the superiority of the latest appliances, you can't go back, right? If you're dissatisfied, why don't you buy new ones? Though, after paying the compensation, it seems unlikely that you'll have enough money to buy new high-end appliances. While this was going on, the movers were rapidly moving my stuff into their truck under my direction. They bowed to me and hopped into the truck. Okay, I'll be heading to the new address as well. Please make sure everything gets there. As I watched the moving truck drive off, I got into my car. Of course, this car is also mine.
Where is that truck going?
Bob asked. Huh? Of course, I'm taking it to my apartment. The one I lived in before you were transferred. My apartment. The apartment I bought when I was single was listed for sale with a realtor due to Bob's job transfer. However, because the asking price was too high, it never sold, and I still own it. The realtor suggested lowering the price several times, but I'm glad I didn't. I never imagined this would happen. As I fastened my seatbelt, I laughed softly. But maybe, just maybe, I predicted this would happen deep down. What? Bob made a face as if he didn't understand. Because I set a selling price higher than the market rate to make sure it wouldn't sell. This way, I could always move back to my apartment. Upon hearing my words, Bob seemed to crumble from the knees.
You, such a bitch!
Feeling sure of my victory and letting my guard down, I was suddenly shoved by my mother-in-law, who rushed at me yelling. As I groaned in pain, my mother-in-law attempted to throw a cutting board at me for a follow-up attack, but was suddenly tackled by a black object and fell down yelling, "Ah!" Thank you, Blackie. Holding the black object, a stray cat named Blackie, I got in the moving truck and hurried to my new place to escape from my mother-in-law. I don't know why Blackie, the stray cat, was there at that moment, but I'm sure he came to help me because he has a strong sense of justice. I'll give him some catnip as a gift later. After that, Bob and I divorced. The law firm I work at filed a lawsuit for compensation against Bob and his parents. It's a real blessing that the young lawyers in training at the office accepted my case for almost no fee at all. Even though a young new lawyer is in charge, I feel secure because they have the support of a senior lawyer. As for the lawsuit against Melissa Smith, the senior lawyer himself took on the case, not the trainees. He said he will file both criminal and civil lawsuits because of the high degree involved. He said he's excited to file a criminal lawsuit, as it's been a long time since he's done so. Even if they sell their house and pay to Melissa Smith and to me, it probably won't be enough. Thinking about the life of extreme poverty and debt waiting for the three of them, I can't help but grin. I'm alone now, but compared to living with those in-laws and my disloyal husband, it's like heaven. For a while, I want to enjoy the easy single life with Blackie, who I inadvertently brought to my apartment.
Look, I'm giving you a pass this time, okay? Just come back. I'll look the other way, just for now. What is this guy going on about? He must be clueless. Time to give him a dose of harsh reality. My name is Olivia, and I'm 32. Been married to my husband Mason for a year now. We met at a party, a casual get-together hosted by a friend. We hit it off, started dating like any other couple, and eventually tied the knot. We're not getting any younger after all. Mason's not the most exciting guy, but he brings a sense of peace. That's why I thought we'd make it till the end, till we're old and gray. We both work, so going hungry is not on the cards. Got married without overthinking. I handle most of the housework since we're both busy with our jobs. Mason never helps. He's either lounging around or heads out early, rarely spending time at home. But I never found housework to be a burden. My parents lived like this too. I accepted this as the kind of life a wife would have. I have a 9-to-5 job and I'm not overloaded with hobbies. Mason and I were never chatty to begin with. We both respected each other's space and it was never an issue. Life went on. One night, Mason came home late, presumably from drinking with coworkers, friends, who knows. I welcomed him. Mason, you're home late. Had a long night out, huh? Dinner's still there if you want it, but I guess you're not eating this late, are you? He turned around and said nothing, and walked into the living room, ignoring me. I sighed. Here we go again. Whenever Mason is in a bad mood, he gets very quiet. So I figured something at work or during his night out must have upset him. Best to let him be. I know better than to poke the bear when he's like this. I felt his presence from the living room, but shrugged it off and went to bed. He'll probably be back to his cheerful self by morning. It was the same old story. And I didn't give it a second thought. The next morning, while I was preparing breakfast, Mason came into the kitchen. Good morning, I greeted him cheerfully. Mason glanced at me, grabbed some milk from the fridge, and left without a word. I was a bit surprised by his coldness. It wasn't like him. Seems like he's still in a bad mood. I never thought I'd see the day. I mused, aware that we were a family of strong, independent individuals. I hadn't made a point to talk to Mason, really. I decided to wait and see. So I continued prepping lunchboxes for both Mason and myself. However, things didn't go back to normal that easily. Mason remained distant the following night and the day after. At this point, I was genuinely concerned. Days turned into weeks and Mason continued to give me the silent treatment. I tried reaching out through WhatsApp and even left him notes, but he ignored it all. However, he'd eat the meals I prepared. I noticed the empty lunchbox in the sink, so I knew he ate the packed lunch. So I put a note in the cooler bag. I thought if he found a note while enjoying the lunch I made with love, he'd have to react. But that was another miss. Mason said nothing. Before I knew it, over a month had passed in this strange silence. I felt helpless. I had tried everything, but nothing worked. Then one evening, I took a drastic step. I deliberately didn't prepare dinner. Every evening, I made dinner when I got home. But what if I didn't? How would Mason, who's been ignoring me, react? I decided to find out. But when Mason came home, I pretended to be watching TV in the living room. Mason came into the living room and looked intently at the table where dinner usually waited. But tonight, the table was empty. After looking at the barren table, Mason turned his gaze to me. Holding my breath, I waited for him to say something, but he walked out of the living room in complete silence. I heard the front door open and shut with a bang. I was stunned. Why am I being ignored like this? I had no idea why. I was left bewildered, sitting alone on the living room couch. The next morning, I woke up and went to the living room. Mason was already gone. Did he go to work already? Curious, I looked on the living room table and found a note. Reading the words on it, my eyes went wide. "Stop skipping out on your wifely duties," it read, scribbled hastily in a messy handwriting. Something inside me snapped. That's it. I'm done. Why do I have to keep pleasing Mason? Is this going to be my life forever? We were never a clingy couple, but this is just unacceptable. And there's no reason for him to do this, nor an opportunity for me to even ask about it. For the last month, the stifling silence in the house has been unbearable. I wrote next to Mason's scribble, "I'm going back to my parents' house." I quickly packed up my things and went home. My sudden arrival did surprise my parents, but after I explained how Mason had been ignoring me for over a month without any apparent reason, they understood and welcomed me warmly. It felt good to be in an environment where I could have a normal conversation. For now, I decided to stay here and see how Mason reacts before deciding on my next steps. I didn't hear from Mason the day I left. Knowing him, he's probably assuming I'm just trying to make a point and will continue to ignore me. Well, let's see how long this lasts. Days turned into weeks, and there was still no call or message from Mason via WhatsApp or any other means. He didn't even bother to visit my parents' house. Before I knew it, half a year had passed. I had nearly forgotten about Mason altogether. Then, one day, as I was leaving my parents' house to go shopping, there he was. Mason, standing with a defiant and angry expression. I was shocked and froze in my tracks. Mason just glared at me, still not saying a word. Is this game still going on? It was almost laughable how silent Mason was. But then, in the next moment, he tried to walk into my parents' house without saying a word. Whoa, hold on there. I stopped him. Mason looked at me, his face a mix of anger and disbelief, but still silent. I warned. I said, don't just walk in. I will call the police. Finally, after more than 6 months, Mason spoke, a snide smile on his lips. Look, at you, getting all uppity with me? Since when do you get so high and mighty? Just because you're at your parents' house doesn't mean you can act like that, you know? I remember Mason being a bit rough around the edges, but not like this. Lost in thought, I was jolted back to reality when Mason suddenly erupted. What the hell are you thinking? You leave the house for half a year, enjoying yourself at your parents' home? Get a grip! Mason ranted on, then spread his arms out as if to say, I can't believe this. Look, I'll give you a break this time, right? Just come home, I'm willing to turn a blind eye, this time. Mason spoke so condescendingly. I calmly retorted, I think you're confused. You and I are strangers now, you know. Mason's face went blank, then turned beet red with rage. He started yelling again. What the hell are you saying? Did you lose your mind? We're married, aren't we? Stop messing around. His intense outburst silenced me for a moment, and he kept yelling. I'm saying I'll forgive you this time, so stop fooling around and pack your bags. At that moment, my own anger boiled over. He talks like he's doing me a favor by forgiving me, as if I've done something wrong. That infuriated me even more. Moreover, it seemed Mason had no clue what had happened in the last 6 months. Finally, I snapped at Mason, who was still yelling away. I received divorce papers from your mother, signed them, and already filed them with the court, so we're not married anymore, got it? We're strangers. Total strangers. Understand? I emphasized the word strangers, and Mason looked at me, his face drained of color. He seemed genuinely shocked. Here's what happened. A month after I moved back to my parents' home, my then mother-in-law, Helen, called me to a cafe near our house. We had never been close, and I hadn't seen her for a while. After brief pleasantries, she handed me an envelope. What's this? I asked, tilting my head. Open it. Even you will understand, she said. In response, I opened an envelope and pulled out the paper inside. It was a divorce petition, already signed and stamped by Mason. Confused, I looked at Helen. The eyes of his mother, who was glaring at me, were the same as Mason's, full of disdain. While putting the divorce petition back into the envelope, I asked his mother. So, is this Mason's doing? I asked her. Did he say anything to you about this? Helen let out an exaggerated sigh before answering. Oh, yes, he said plenty. Would you like to hear? I smiled at her and replied, yes, please go ahead. She launched into her story. According to her, Mason had been bad-mouthing me for a while now, saying that I was a useless and incompetent wife, who stopped doing any housework after we got married, that I quit my job and lazed around at home all day. And that whenever something didn't go my way, I would run back to my parents and act like a spoiled child. Helen's eyes never left mine as she spoke, and it was clear she believed every word of Mason's lies. There was no point in arguing with her, I thought. When she was done talking, Helen finally asked, "So, what are you going to do? Not that I want to meddle, but you're being pretty awful, you know." By the time I walked out of that house, my mind was made up. I smiled and told her, if he wants a divorce, then that's what he'll get. Helen glared at me one last time, slapped some money on the table for her share, and walked out of the cafe. I went straight to my parents' house, signed the divorce papers, and submitted them to the court the very next day. While I was explaining all of this, Mason's face turned increasingly pale. It seemed he hadn't been informed by Helen at all, but honestly, I didn't care. After all, I had already entrusted Helen with the signed divorce papers. Mason must have had the same idea in mind, I figured. Once I finished telling my side, Mason blurted out in a panic, "No, you've got it all wrong. I only filled out those divorce papers to keep my mom off my back. I never intended to submit them. They're invalid." Panicked or just confused, he started making no sense. "And besides, you're the one who will suffer if we divorce, so let's go to the court right now and have them withdrawn." I gave Mason a cold stare, then tilted my head. Why would it be a problem for me if we got divorced? Mason suddenly grinned as if he had won. "Think about your age. At your age with a divorce history, no one will want you. That's why I'm saying I'll take you back. This is for your benefit. You get it? I'm saying we can pretend the divorce never happened and you should be happy." I couldn't help but roll my eyes at his arrogance and delusional thinking. Listen, we're not kids. A divorce doesn't just get erased, and for the record, I'm already married to someone else. Mason's jaw dropped and he went silent. "What? Really?" Do you want me to repeat myself? I'm married to someone else. Mason, who had a look of disbelief, suddenly started making a fuss. "That's a lie. You're just trying to look good, aren't you? You're making up stories to get me to go away, aren't you? You're really making a fool out of me, you know that? Such lies won't work." Well, if he wants to be a fool, that's his problem. As I was wondering how to explain to this idiot, a presence came from behind me and a man appeared at the entrance. The man looked at me and Mason alternately, looking confused. Mason, for his part, was surprised to see a stranger coming out of my parents' home and fell silent. When I looked at the man, he tilted his head and asked, "Is something wrong?" Feeling awkward, I smiled and turned to Mason. "This is my husband, Noah." Noah greeted Mason with a slight skeptical nod. Mason took a step back and looked up at Noah. It made sense. Noah was a former national rugby player with an imposing physique. Overwhelmed by Noah's appearance, Mason suddenly started to make excuses. No, you've got it all wrong. My old boss told me, you've been married for about a year now and your wife might start to get a little uncomfortable. Better put her in her place." So I did. And guess what? Turns out he got dumped by his wife and kids. What a fool, right? I was just doing what he told me to do. I never wanted to do any of that stuff. You understand, right, Olivia? I looked at Mason with a gaze filled with disgust, fed up with his pathetic excuses. Mason looked puzzled, maybe because my reaction wasn't what he expected. Then Noah spoke up. "Sorry, but could you leave immediately and never come back here? If you approach Olivia again, I'll call the police." As he said this, Noah firmly pushed Mason out of the doorway. Intimidated by Noah's force and determination, Mason fled the scene. For a while, we both remained wary, concerned that Mason might harbor a grudge and do something irrational. But days turned into weeks and we never heard from him again. One day, curiosity got the best of me, and I reached out to a mutual friend to inquire about Mason. We began by catching up on casual topics, but when I asked about Mason, our friend sighed and filled me in. Surprisingly, Mason had quit his job just a few days after showing up at my parents' house. The reason? Turns out Mason was always in agreement with his boss, who he trusted. When the boss harassed subordinates at work, it became a big issue in the company. As a result, the boss was resigned. Resigned being a euphemism. He was basically demoted to some remote mountainous area I'd never heard of. Apparently, Mason was expected to be transferred as well, but he quit out of pride. According to our friend, he's still jobless. He's been looking for work, but his arrogance has hindered his efforts. Even when recruiters offer him opportunities, he declines interviews. Furthermore, news of him quitting reached his mother, who then disowned him due to her own extreme personality. Finally, our friend said, "He blames everything on his old manager and just drowns his sorrows every day. At this rate, he'll ruin his health before he ever finds another job. It's a mess. I hope he finds a new spouse or something, though that's unlikely." We both chuckled as we hung up the phone. Mason seems to be drowning his days in job hunting and drinking. Thanks to him, I am now living a peaceful life with Noah. Interestingly, Noah was actually my colleague. Upon hearing about my divorce, he had eagerly pursued me. Though we started dating with only 6 months after my divorce, which made me somewhat hesitant, I was quickly drawn to his confident manner and kind personality. After getting married, Noah told me that he had always had a crush on me, and he was heartbroken when I got married. I laughed and apologized for not noticing his feelings sooner. Noah helps me around the house, a task I used to handle alone. Whenever we eat together, he always says how delicious the food is with a smile. It's these little things that make me incredibly happy, something I never expected. I was probably numb to it all, having grown up with old-fashioned parents. Now I am living a sparkling married life with Noah, who always delights in even the most ordinary things. I'm convinced that with him, I'll have a happy life all the way through our golden years, and so I was certain.